It's not that the Mac is that great. It's just that it sucks less than Windows. And this is just kind of a funny anecdote, speaking of analogy. So we have 4 daughters. I always say to people, so one of the daughters gets texted with an image, a photo, by all the other girls before they go out. Okay?
Right.
Like, do I look okay? Right?
Sure.
I personally...
Fit check.
Right, fit check. Exactly right. They were telling people over 10 years ago, as soon as you're, got your product market fit and you're ready to scale, get out of here. But the only business that can afford to not apply technology well to their business, given that it makes tomorrow more productive than today, like every day, is a business that's going out of business.
Welcome back to another riveting episode of Cheat Code and Friends. I'm joined here by 50% of my normal co-hosts, Mr. Josh Wagner. Josh, good to see you sitting 5 feet away from me.
Live. This is weird. Yeah, I don't think we've done one face-to-face in person live.
Not with everyone in the show.
Our guest is here. We're here. We're testing it out. So hopefully it works out well for everybody.
That's the benefit of having everyone in Arizona. So another great episode here today. Great guest. So we're joined by Don Fotsch, who is serial technologist, entrepreneur, organizations like Apple, John Deere, and then moved to Arizona. I forget how many years ago, Don?
5 years ago.
5 years from Chicago. And Don's been pretty active, I think, on both the networking side and kind of creating groups that we'll talk through today, as well as on the angel side of the house. I think brings an interesting perspective of what is our topic today, which is kind of 0 to 1 in environments across the board. But I think Arizona is an interesting petri dish to talk about that topic through the lens of. So, Don, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you guys this morning.
That's good to have you. We don't have a lot of technology first folks.
That's right.
So many go-to-market.
A lot of go-to-market first.
Yeah,
folks.
A lot of go-to-market folks. This is good.
Yeah,
this is good. I like.
We're going to think different.
Sure. So, give us a little bit of background, and then would love to hear kind of the impetus for the move here, and then just kind of what you found in terms of Arizona in general when you made the switch.
Sure. So again, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So I'm a mechanical engineer by undergrad. I'm actually one of 8 children. So there's 4 engineers, 2 doctors, a dentist, and an accountant. Dad wasn't big on lawyers. Nothing against lawyers. That's good. And so, as you mentioned, my first job was at John Deere, manufacturing engineering, programming CNC equipment, building farm implements, all that good stuff. Finished up grad school. Was going to go back to Deere, and then this fruit company called Apple came to campus, and they're like, "Hey, we're changing the world."
Fruit baskets, right?
And my dad is like, "No." He ran his own machine tool company. He's like, "You got to stay with John Deere."
And what year is this?
And this is like 87
okay.
after grad school.
Wow, that's right.
So not the Apple of today.
Yeah. So fast forward, Kate and I get married in 87. We go off to California, Silicon Valley, and I was at Apple for 10 years. Almost to the day, the 10 years that Steve was not there.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And interestingly, was on the only major project that went on during those 10 years that, as Steve says, without that project, there wouldn't have been anything for him to come back to.
Wow.
Which was the Power Macintosh. So the Power Macintosh line was the first time in Apple's history that we changed the core processor, which is a big lift. Long story short, if you change the core processor, every processor has an instruction set. If you change a core processor, you have to rewrite the lowest levels of the OS, which is, of course, a lot of work.
Right.
Which is why if you're familiar with Apple's M1, M2, et cetera, processors these days, that's only the second time in Apple's history that the processor has been changed because it's a big lift. So the fast forward is I ended up on that project. I was responsible for global availability at launch, which fortunately we hit, and ended up in my last few years at Apple in system software. So in looking back, the kind of interesting thing, just to summarize that, is if you were to write a movie, direct a movie, produce a movie, and you're like, okay, how would you direct it to have like the ideal 10 years of hardware, software, apps, et cetera, developers background? Like I got the 10 years training. You didn't know it at the time, of course, but as Steve would always say, looking back, you can connect the dots. It's hard to connect them looking forward. So was it a startup in Silicon Valley, actually, that was a bunch of Apple people that were working on a next generation OS that frankly we were intending to sell back to Apple, because we knew that, having been at Apple, that the probability of getting the next generation OS built in Apple was not high for a variety of reasons we don't need to get into. And we're in discussions with Apple about potentially being bought. And some of the developers at Next, which was a company that Steve had started, got wind of this. And of course, they had something we didn't have called Steve Jobs. So they ended up acquiring Next. And, the rest is history there. So after that time in Silicon Valley in the startup, that was BOS, actually partially funded, interestingly, by Intel at the time. Back to the Midwest with US Robotics, and 3Com was on the team that created the first 56K modem, which was the last analog modem before broadband. We had the crazy mathematicians on our team that knew how to get to 56K, which nobody else could figure out.
Mind-blowing speeds.
Yeah, right.
Days,
Yeah, exactly. Which fortunately for us was just a software upgrade. Everybody else had to upgrade their processor in the modem. And then off to AOL. On the East Coast, a little bit of time at Comcast. And then my buddies from the 3Com days call me and they're like, hey, we're at PayPal. We understand you did some website redesign at Comcast. Any chance you'd consider coming back to the Bay Area? So from DC back to Silicon Valley, 5 years at PayPal, built PayPal's first ever user experience and design group. So visual design, UI design, user research, analytics, et cetera. And that was a blast because frankly, people didn't, at the time, the way that you bought things on eBay and paid for them, of course, was only with PayPal. And they had no analytics. We were just trying to keep the infrastructure up every day because we were growing so damn fast. And so it was a lot of fun to build a UX team and to build actually the first brand operating guidelines in the history of PayPal, which is a funny story only because the way we built it. So these are the colors we use. These are the fonts we use. This is how we answer the phone. This is how we send emails and the copy content, the words we use.
Grown up stuff.
Yeah. It's like the symphony of a user experience. Everything's supposed to show up as if, it's directed by the same team.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we got that built, we literally hired one person from Apple and she knocked out the whole brand guidelines, which is usually at times big companies like millions of dollars and huge teams. So after PayPal was at Betfair, UK-based company that we took public from being a startup, actually Silicon Valley folks involved in that. That was interesting because it was started by a professional, basically stock market exchange person, a professional punter, as they say, a bettor. So for the first time in that industry, it was bet matching. So you guys are betting on the Arizona Cardinals. I'm betting on the Packers because I'm a cheesehead. And it just matches the bets as opposed to we're both betting against the house.
Got it.
And that grew very nicely. We took that public, and then my dad had some health issues. So back to the Midwest, actually with Sears Online, which actually we grew quite well. But unfortunately, Sears, the core company, wasn't doing that great. And ended up
culture shift. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that prepared me a little bit for that was being at AOL when we bought Time Warner, which is probably that would probably make the Hall of Fame train wreck culture integrations attempts.
I don't know.
Right?
We had a couple in the running there.
Yeah. And so ended up then going into healthcare, running the world's largest home delivery pharmacy, which was fascinating. $22 billion of $100 billion in sales. And then more recently, I've just been doing applied AI startups in the food inspection, beverage inspection, and battery detection and recycling processing. There's a lot of fires going on in that world, unfortunately.
Literally.
And then coming to Arizona. So 5 years ago, the last of our 6 kids, they're all nerds, 4 girls, 2 boys, 24 to 35, spread around the country, big companies like Apple, some at startups. And interestingly, we decided to come to Arizona because we're like, where's the sun? We got to go find the sun. 4 months of gray is too long.
We got plenty of that.
Yeah. And we're like, we're not going to Arizona, or we're not going to Florida, too humid. Not going back to California. They still haven't figured out how to run the place. And so, but we love California. We're still, there often, but it's just, we don't need to get into that. So end up in Arizona because our oldest at the time lived here. And the fast forward is you come here and, I'll just quickly relate it to this is, you guys probably know this. So the state motto in Arizona is Ditat Deus. Okay, so that translates God enriches. So it turns out that we're one of only 5 states in the country whose state motto explicitly references God, just like our country, in God we trust, right? So as my mom says, we're Catholic. I don't know that we're good at it, but, you might expect that with 8 kids and all that, or then 6 for us. But again, that's a next episode. But the thing that just struck me is like, why aren't there more billion-dollar companies around that are homegrown? More Axons, okay, for example, which for those who may not know, $60 billion company, totally homegrown, 30 some years old here in Scottsdale. And what I learned is everybody that does, again, no offense to everybody I was meeting, people very welcoming, do a fair amount of work with people at the ACA, various venture groups, etc. But very few, if any, that I met after, several months of kind of taking some time saying, hey, I need to really dial into things here because I think I can help, grow things. But very incredibly few were technical, wrote code, know anybody who wrote code, bend metal, cut metal, pick your favorite thing. And so some of the local founders are like, Don, we just need to connect the rich people and connect the nerds, and then we'll be good. And I said, okay, well, my experience is if the nerds are working on solving problems for humanity and can make money solving, the rich people will find them. So let's simplify and just focus on the nerds. And that was the start of the Arizona Nerd Network, which was started a year ago, February. So February 2024, now numbers just short of 550 nerds all over the state. And we're continuing to grow. We have monthly meetups. And the whole point of that is to make it easier to scale companies here. You guys probably know this, but every other call or ping that I get these days is, hey, Don, can you help me find locally a full stack developer who's AI native savvy, knows the AI stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so the way my brain thinks being a builder is like, guys, we got to manufacture those people, more of them. We have to figure out how to do a boot camp. We have to flood the zone with talent, right?
Right.
Because why? Because here's kind of the punchline that I'll wrap up with. Is not only does Arizona have a incredibly, I would say, USA aligned, rich heritage of very strong values that attracts people, but part of that attraction results in us having the highest, it's like number 1 or number 2 non-native population of any state in the country, which is a proxy for, as I work with the ACA folks and others, I'm like, guys, that's the data that says the talent wants to be here. So the only thing better than like Silicon Valley or here or Austin or whatever hotspot you want to say in applied tech is to have those places be in a location where people want to live, where they want to not only build companies, right, but they want to build families. They want to build enduring friendships, right? And I don't know if you guys saw this, you probably did, but Cognite just announced industrial AI, applied AI firm, that they're moving their global headquarters from Oslo, Norway to Tempe, right? And one of the things they explicitly said in the article that basically covered that story, they explicitly said our team really appreciated the values that they experienced in Arizona. And beyond that, they even mentioned many of our folks are basically people of faith, kind of different flavors, if you will. And they couldn't help but notice that, wow, this would be a place they'd feel very welcome. Feel very welcome. So hopefully that.
No, it's great comprehensive background. I think the thing I take from it is like you've seen it done well, which I find is a perspective not represented super well in Arizona, actually. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The only caveat I would put to the melting pot, the transient population of Arizona is that when you look at those stats, a lot of it tends to be retirees, right? Or folks that are moving here because of the ancillary lifestyle. Like, we've got a ton of golf. We've got access to water, even though we don't have a beach. We've got a lot of, recreation type stuff. But I think the reason why, or the catalyst for shifting that age band is the type of things that you're talking about. Like when we talk to founders, certainly local founders, finding talent in the state is incredibly difficult, right? Yeah. Or they don't know where to look for it. They're doing the typical thing, putting out, job ads, and whoever you get, you kind of filter through. And so I think my big takeaway there is like Arizona needs to do a better job of looking at the explicit facts that exist. Like, yeah, we've got the desire, but there are some big gaps within that, the ingredient list. And I think what you're talking, what you're creating is historically one of those gaps.
Yeah. And, frankly, it's really exciting because we are definitely a state that seems to love to, we now rank 3 in this, we now rank 1. And no offense,
we celebrate a lot of things.
But it's like, this is like the fans. This is the people in the stands. You need people in the stands because you can't make any money if you don't have people paying for tickets. But from a player's perspective, to your point, that like with the Nerd Network, the fact that we just do monthly meetups and we're over 500 people, like how the hell does that happen? Mm-hmm. And the answer is the talent actually is here. Now, but I think that your point is a great one. And the reason that we kind of create it in part is if you go to Silicon Valley, you go to Boston, pick your favorite, you can just go to a local coffee shop. And if you're in a tech, zone, right? Half the people in there are tech people, right? Hardware, software, whatever. And here we have a lot of those people, but they're spread out. When I first got here we were fortunate to build a new home not too far from where we're sitting here in Paradise Valley. And we got in 2 years ago. I was like, I'm going to spend half my time just helping build the technology-based economy here because this is just like the plan. And, I would talk to people and I'm like, guys, as I'm meeting people, particularly the people in like the Nerd Network, there were a ton of people and still are who are building young families, for example, or they're in the process of, as they say, finding their person.
Sure.
I want to find my person. I want to build a family. And you probably wouldn't be too surprised. But to your point on the data, the folks are like, oh, we're number 3 in this. And then they'll look at the data exactly like you said, which was a perfect lead in. It's like, oh, but the bulk of the people are retirees. It's like, okay, but the bulk of people aren't on the road and we're worried about traffic. I mean, like what? That's right. Okay. But the question is, let's get on the field and what's that data tell us? Mm-hmm. And what that tells us, I can tell you, is within the last 3 months, I've had probably at least a couple a month of literally couples coming over for coffee. Latest one was a guy at Apple, works in Silicon Valley. His wife's with him. She's due in 2 months. And they're like, we're going to leave California because we don't want to raise our kids in California. And I've heard this even from Google engineers, phenomenal Google engineers who used to live here, one in the Bay Area. And before he left, he invested, which you guys love this, he put some money into a local VC. Okay. And he says to me, before he leaves, not only are they coming, the young, people, right? The talent. He says, before I leave, Don, I know I don't want to build a family there. So before I leave, I put money in that VC because I'm coming back. Because when we get to a point where we want to build a family, we want to build a family here. Mm-hmm. And so I just highlight that because to me, it's like, you guys know this from experience. It's like the story you put out in your article about how you built your VC firm, right? It's like on the ground, connect with the people, understand what's going on, and then, so to speak, feed the beast. Right. People are saying, hey, I want to come somewhere else. Where can I do tech building stuff and build not only a business, but build a life? Right. And that's, I think, where we are learning that's one of the pockets of growth that we want to, that's like a tailwind, you'd say, right? Sure. Of growth that we want to actively support.
It's easy to complain and say, oh, all of California's coming here. All of New York's coming, all of Chicago's coming here. Everybody's invading our state. But if you think of it the other way and lean into it a little bit, there are those advantages, right? Because if the talent isn't natively here, right? How do we take advantage of the resources that we have? And I make it an analogy. I'm a hockey player, right? In the desert from Arizona. That doesn't make sense, right? So I played on the club hockey team at Arizona State. Right. We were fine. We were okay. We had a good time, this and that. But I always said, if you go to Canada and Chicago and Boston and bring them here and say, hey, you want to play hockey here? Or do you want to stay in Saskatoon? And now, one of my teammates at the time, his dad, a Midwestern guy from Wisconsin, he dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into the program. Now they're a D1 program and we're pulling in the best hockey players from all over. So I make that analogy with the tech community. Take advantage of the fact that people want to be here. Bring the talent in here.
It's a perfect analogy. And what I would just reinforce is like when we went to Silicon Valley in 87, right? And it's like the San Jose Sharks. I'm like, what? Like I'm from Wisconsin. What the hell? How do you even play hockey? Yeah. It's like California. And then we come to learn, like Kate says this now. She's like, oh my God, if I was raising young kids here and they wanted to play hockey, I'd want to be here.
That's right.
Because you know what? It's a great, cool place to go in the summer.
exactly right.
Right?
Exactly
It's like
right.
and you said that exactly right. It's just the shift. And to me, the biggest thing, if you kind of made a list of all the things that attract the talent and can attract the talent,
Right.
That's good for, in my humble opinion, I think it's just, the plan from above is Arizona is going to be to America what America is to the world. And what does that mean? Well, that means that we're actually the baby of the family. So of the 48 contiguous states, we're the youngest one.
The last one.
And as a father of 6, there comes a time when the baby goes to the front.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just kind of a funny anecdote, speaking of analogy. So we have 4 daughters. I always say to people, so one of the daughters gets texted with an image, a photo, by all the other girls before they go out. Okay?
Right.
Like, do I look okay?
Right. Sure.
I personally.
Fit check.
Right. Fit check. Exactly right. And guess who is the one who they all text? And everybody. Right.
Yeah, she's the youngest.
Right. Exactly. There it is. Okay. And because she knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people think it's the oldest one.
That's right.
It's like, no. And I say this in part because the thing that I would say particularly, it's almost like you would say as somebody who snuck in when you guys weren't watching the gate, right? Is, what you don't understand. Like I don't understand some of these things about Wisconsin. That's where I grew up. But I think a blind spot for the natives, if you will, all due respect, right? Is that, the thing that's least talked about, but most often referenced among the talent that's coming and growing numbers of talent that's coming is what you would very simply say is the values of the state. Like you come here, nobody's trying to oversell you on a political party. Nobody's trying to oversell you on this or that. There's a little bit of it here or there, but it's like, you can just come, as I like to say, this is back to the Apple reference. It's not that the Mac is that great. It's just that it sucks less than Windows. And it turns out that if you live in America, you got to live somewhere.
That's right.
Okay. And if you can live in a place that sucks less than every other place, it's like, sign me
That's
up.
the new headline.
Yeah, we suck less
We suck
than
less.
I ran that by the ACA. They were
They didn't like
they
it.
were not inspired.
Wasn't punchy enough. We suck less.
So I'm curious, obviously, you saw the need, you've responded to that with it. But are you guys the only, or like certainly the largest technical meetup, right?
Yeah, I would say that, probably the simplest way to say it, as far as I know, yes. And we're the only one that's very, very specifically, intentionally focused very tactically on every builder in the state of Arizona will kind of loosely know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a very simple goal. Because why? Because we believe we are already and will increasingly become the state to scale, tech and applied tech companies. And the only thing better, like you guys referenced, than hiring the people who have the talent that you need is hiring people who have the talent that you need, who you already know and our values aligned to.
Sure.
Right. Which is why, like in Silicon Valley, it's, you bump it into people, or Boston, pick your favorite ones. And a lot of them, people are hiring people they know.
Right.
So we're like, okay, well, let's go help everybody know each other. Mm-hmm. And we don't have a website, which is some people like, that's kind of pitiful for a bunch of nerds. But we're like, yeah, but that's because we're the nerds who are really weird, because we're really into this thing called show up in person and meet people in person.
Great.
And it turns out on the heels of COVID, this is a hugely, compelling aspect of it, to the point where now we've had a kind of adjacent group start now, where like one group called Phoenix Builds, they get together every Wednesday night. This coming Wednesday is one of those, so that's tomorrow, 6 to 9 p.m. And it's a bunch of nerds who literally are coding for 3 hours with other people. Mm. And the funny part, which you guys will appreciate, is I look at them, I go to the things, I help them with space, because, space is,
right.
Gotta have space. And there's like 50 show up, and I look at them and I'm like, you guys, this is what work was like for me every day.
Every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like 10 hours a day. It was working with people I loved.
With a commute on either end.
Yes, exactly. But you were spending time with people that you really enjoyed, and you spent time with those people outside of work,
right,
as well. And then you see that, a lot of these folks, some of them work remote. Some of them are like, yeah, I like my teammates, but I don't like them like I like these people. And we're like, okay, well, see, that's what we want to connect everybody. Yep. And then it makes it, this part I have gotten the support, and kind of adjusted the positioning, if you will, with the ACA, is I say what everybody should know. Like, I don't know if you've heard about Arizona Tech Week. That's going to be our big tech week starting next year. if the only thing that people take away is, oh my God, that is the place to scale a tech and applied tech company, it's like, boom, that's us. And interesting, nobody's kind of gunning for that. Well, why? Like you guys would know this, more than 10 years ago, Mark Andreessen, pick your favorite Silicon Valley VC, they were telling people over 10 years ago, as soon as you're, got your product market fit and you're ready to scale, get out of here. Mm-hmm. Because you can't afford, and we don't want you, right? The talent may be here, but you have to scale it up somewhere else. And I'm like, okay. And by the way, Cognite is a great example where they understand all this stuff we're talking about, and their CEO has spent a fair amount of time here over the years. And that recent decision in part is due to all the things we've talked about, plus proximity to California.
Mm-hmm. And so, you mentioned kind of the core mission of the group and so on. I'm curious, there's obviously a huge push for education around emerging tech and,
yes.
how do we do essentially a sandbox to play with this new technology and understand what works and create that skill set. What are your thoughts on the context side of the house? Because our lack of exits here in Arizona specifically, our lack of, folks that have come up in an organization that went from 1 to 20 to 50 to 100 plus. Yeah. It's just a very small pool of organizations. And to your point, a lot of those aren't in the tech space, right? Like we've got mining, we've got real estate, we've got manufacturing, we've got a ton of call center and kind of back office type stuff.
Yes.
So how do you impart that context as well to go with the technical acumen?
So a couple of things I would just say, but I think probably the most important thing is that, again, this feels like an untold story, but you're on the field, like you just see it because you live it every day, is that if you think about so if you just zoom out and say, well, fundamentally, why is culture and tech, like with this nerd network, those are the two things we're hyper focused on. So we say we're nerds, we like rules, we just don't like many rules, so we have one rule. And it's actually the one rule that Arizona gives us as we show up. It's the golden rule. Quick aside, you guys may know this. We're the only state in the country where you can literally buy a vanity license plate that literally says, live the golden rule, which is to treat others as you want to be treated. Every time we have our meetups, we have a very short huddle because it's mostly just about meeting other nerds. Mm-hmm. And every month, we say, okay, who knows our one rule? And then we call it out, right? And I say that because what Arizona to me is at its soul, and answer your question, is the best of values of humanity and the best of technology. And the thing that, again, not to pick on the natives here, but the thing that's like wild that I think some of the natives don't necessarily see is that the technology, though it's frustrating at times, like, oh, we can't find the talent. Maybe it's here, but it's hard to find these kind of things. Is that, like, guys, the hard part is actually not the technology. The hardest part, but the technology is critical along with the values. Why? Because technology always has and always will deliver one specific thing, which is continued productivity improvement. Mm-hmm. And you guys know better than me, given what you do, but the only business that can afford to not apply technology well to their business, given that it makes tomorrow more productive than today, like every day, is a business that's going out of business. Mm-hmm. So when you say almost apologetically, not that you meant it that way, but like, we got mining, and I give you another favorite one. It turns out in the winter months in the United States, over 70% of the leafy green vegetables in the United States that are consumed come from Arizona.
Nor did I.
Unbelievable, right? So if you take that, you take mining, another one, like, I don't know, when I got to Arizona, I'm like, is mining like a thing? Isn't there, doesn't the copper wire just go on trees? Well, how's that work? And it's like, that's not only is that a really important, it's a more important industry today with essential, right? So the thing that I think that we are learning to connect kind of to your point is we need to, as they say, like, you need to understand your wins and then start stacking more of them. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with like Paradox, right? They just have a definitive agreement
big headlines.
To get acquired with Workday. Okay. We're familiar with Axon. Now, Axon's, those are two really interesting ones because Paradox is going to exit. I'm guessing that's a little over $1 billion. We'll know in the fall. But, which is obviously a good thing. And then why is that a big deal? Because the local money people who have money that get it out of there can invest in, the next, as we like to say,
Go and start companies.
John Deere reference, more seed corn.
Yeah.
So Axon, by contrast, is one of these, they're grinding for decades, literally, right? And then that thing is 30 some years old. That isn't, that's not a short amount of time, right? But I think to your point, we need to study those wins and say, okay, to your point, like how do we manufacture more of those? And what I would say is that I'll give an example. Do you guys happen to know a company named Tarum Labs?
Tarum. Yeah.
Okay, so this is my
Phoenix.
Yes,
Okay.
it's in Arizona, founded by a guy named Troy Swope and his co-founder Kate King. And what I would say is we have all the hard stuff that's long lead time, like universities and so forth, and government that stays out of the way. Hopefully, will be even better going forward. But we have all those hard, long lead time things. We have, and most importantly among them is that culture, is the values. And so when you look at these wins, like Tarum Labs is a great example. Here's the recipe. And again, you guys probably know this better than I do. But the most common, if you say, what's the most common way that a startup gets created, doesn't die, and actually prospers? And then, in fact, does change the world for the better. And the pattern's very consistent. It's people like Troy Swope, who spent 14 years at Intel. Clean rooms in semiconductors, the cleanest thing you'll find on the planet Earth. Right. And somehow he got curious about microplastics in food. So he asked his wife, this is several years ago now, hey, can you give me some containers of just like, the water, tomatoes, whatever, I'm going to take them into work. And he's like, oh my God, there's just like, we're eating the equivalent of like a credit card every 2 weeks right. is the punchline. And so he started a business which is growing like a weed. I'm sure will be a multi-billion-dollar business, if not more. And it's all based on the science and chemistry he learned at Intel. And he's an ASU grad.
Yeah.
Okay. And so my point with that is that it's the technology, but most importantly, it's the knowledge of the domain.
Yeah. Right. Great.
Right. Not so much the technology, because the technology keeps changing. That's relatively easier to pick up. But like, 20 or 14 years of Intel, that's not easy to pick up, and understanding clean room environment.
Well, that was the thing I always found somewhat interesting is you didn't see a lot of spin outs from Intel and SRP and APS,
yes.
the companies that had the big engineering beds.
Yes.
We weren't seeing entrepreneurs come out of there. So
yes.
I was like, what's going on in that corporate environment? And I'm wondering, listening to you speak here, I'm just going to like maybe read between the lines, because you're talking about the values of, I think, a generation, a younger generation coming in.
Yeah.
And that group of engineers didn't spit out people that went and did startups and had big guys that made a lot of money. All the money and people our age, for the most part, is commercial real estate.
Yes. Yes.
So all people that are in their 40s to 50 that live in the big houses on Exeter are all commercial real estate. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you take that next generation of people that are aligning, the nerds that are aligning to you with those values that want to be here are coming in. Yeah. If in 20 years that group is all going to be tech people. That's going to be the shift you're going to need, I think, to see Arizona make that.
And I think that this is where what seems like we're apologizing for the fact that we have farming and we have mining and we have, but here's the thing that's fascinating. So pick your favorite ChatGPT, Grok, whatever. Right. You ask it this question, which I did 2 months ago. I was like, okay, I'm like, there's something I'm not understanding about the potential here. Cause I'm like, I just know it. I can feel it. It's just like the plan from above. Arizona is going to be to America what America is to the world. And I asked this question. I say, tell me what state has as broad a set of industries with incumbents and startups, plus as high a non-native population, meaning people want to live here, than Arizona. Comes back wicked fast, which is not common these days with those AI chatbots. It says no state. No state has that. And it compared us to California, Florida, Colorado, Nevada, and maybe, was it Utah? Anyway, so, the states you'd expect. Right. Right. And so I think that you hit the nail on the head. And what I would just say, and this is the funny part, with Silicon Valley background, there's this a great article I'll forward over to you guys, short article on the history of Silicon Valley. And back in the day, there was a guy named Terman who was electrical engineering lab leader at Stanford. And he got really pissed off because all his he had one of the best labs in the world that he had built at Stanford. He got pissed off because everybody he was training was leaving the Santa Clara Valley. Okay. So that would be equivalent today of they're leaving the state.
Right.
And he said, okay, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to start investing in companies, but the stipulation will be you have to stay in Silicon Valley. And one of the first checks he wrote was to a guy named Bill Hewlett Packard,
Yeah.
right? So coming back to your point, I think you're like right on the target. I would just say two things. I don't think we have to wait for the generation because here's what happens is like, if you look at people like, you know, pick your favorite successful founder. Like Elon's good these days, Steve back in the day, Gwynne Shotwell who runs SpaceX. If you study these people, they're freaks. They were not like, you know, I don't know, what do you call it? The king and the queen of prom.
Right.
They were not like, they're like, yeah, you know, somewhere on the periphery. They're like the 8 balls. They're not the rest of the balls on the billiard table, right? As my dad would always say of California. But the key thing, right, is to understand the pattern, right? And say, like you said, of, okay, well, if the pattern is the best founders often come from companies with a significant chunk of experience, say at least 5 to 10 years, then if we know that, then we can actually lean in and help cause that to happen. Like, how would we do that? Well, I'll tell you part of what we do. We literally get on a plane, and there's some history of doing this after the 2008 financial crisis in Arizona, which is fascinating, which is part of why we got advanced manufacturing focus here. But you'd literally fly to Silicon Valley, you might go to Austin, and you just say, okay, free beers on us. Arizona's coming to town. Okay. And here's what's going on in Arizona. You just want to come hear about Arizona and having and building a company and building a family.
Right.
That's what we're going to say. We don't need everybody. But if if those two things are interesting to you, come have a beer with us.
Yeah.
And we literally take about 10 of them back on the plane.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Like this is what a startup does. And here in Arizona, this is being the baby in the family. It's like, why not?
Well, I think the question in terms of why not is, I'm curious to hear how you found this, but like, obviously, you know, we said like the technical side, the engineering side has been a gap from a networking standpoint.
Yeah.
How has the, you know, connective tissue and the welcoming attitude been from the other groups that are probably more established? Are you guys partnering together? Do you find
What would be an example?
like a Phoenix Forward? You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Do you find there's an appetite there to work together?
What's Clay's last name?
Mask.
Clay Mask. He was actually over for coffee at the home cafe, Cafe Fotsch. I actually have a neon sign.
You need many boards and everything over there.
It's a fantastic question because here's what it illustrates: is that there's people who, like Clay is probably a good example, who that is an optimistic guy, optimistic, can-do kind of guy.
Who is a founder and startup guy.
But you know, he like you get him relaxed, and he has his frustrations too, right? And so we're talking. I said, look, here's the deal, like. Arizona is going to be to America what America is to the world. And these are the values that built Arizona. Okay. Faithful, ambitious, pioneering, welcoming, and humble. And he looks at me. He's like, where'd you get those? I'm like, what do you mean where I got them? I didn't like having them in my pocket. I said, I'm an engineer. I'm curious. I listen, I watch, I participate. This is what I live as I get to know people. That's what the values are. So I'm just like reporting the news. I'm not making the news. You guys made the news. And he's like, this is incredible. I'm like, well, why is this incredible? And then he writes down the values of Phoenix Forward.
Yeah. Right.
He's like, Don, look at this. I'm like, okay, I guess, you know, you should call my mom because you're telling me I paid attention. And I got, you know, I have years of like, I'm paying attention in school. So what I would say is there's some people, and Clay would be a great example, who are like, oh my God, what can we do together? How can we help?
Right.
You know, Robert Vera over at GCU, right? He's another one. We've supported each other's stuff on LinkedIn, and eventually he just pinged me, Don, let's get on the Zoom. So we got on the Zoom. Don, what do you need? You need space? You need money? What do you need? We need the nerd now. We're into the high schools, Don. We need into the high schools, which will happen, but we're going to let it happen organically, organically. But to summarize that, I would just say what you notice is like those two would be a good example. And this is kind of back to your generational question. Right. Is people like me come in and like, we're just like, hey man, here's how it works. We're not geniuses. This is just, we've lived it.
Right.
So we're going to do everything we can to make it work here, because the hard part is to find another state that has the values. that can do the relationship, the friendship, the family side,
Right.
like Arizona does,
Yep.
coupled with manufacturing literally more engineers every year out of our schools than any other state in the country. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so if we're manufacturing the engineers, but to your point, like we need more kind of hits in terms of companies, we need to just look at, well, where do we have the hits and how do we manufacture more of them? And some of that is people like me coming in and giving people a jolt of kind of energy, the Clays and the Roberts and people like you guys, and then getting to a point where like, look, we more than have the prototype, to use the product development analogy. We're way past alpha, beta. We're early into the market. We know what to do. Now it's a matter of, okay, how do we scale things? Right? And I'll give you one specific tactic that we'll do. I'd say probably before end of June next year, is a lot of the engineers that come out of our schools would be thrilled to give back, but they can't give back in a check. We have some of the least digitally literate students, K-8, in the country, which is a little weird.
Yeah.
So we should go address that. And we should have more full stack developers who are native AI, literate, right, and skilled. So all these engineers that we have coming out of our schools, so GCU, NAU, U of A, ASU, if we went to them and said, hey, would you be willing to dedicate to spend some time doing a little boot camp?
Right.
Okay. For our developers who write code, but they want to be a full stack developer with AI, or there's the ones in high school. Like I guarantee you, I could go get on a weekend 100 of those people easily. And they're like, man, I will give back. Absolutely. I'm so thrilled that anybody even asked me, and so back to kind of the Clays and others, is like connecting and asking people, like, this is the game plan. This is how we get, more of these kind of companies going. And so to me, like the potential's huge. It's more like, it's kind of like inheriting a franchise. Like you mentioned hockey,
Right.
You inherit a franchise and you're like, look, I'm a member of the family. We've been crappy owners, like I'll take football, like the Chicago Bears have been crappy forever. Like we say in Green Bay, we say Bears.
We're hanging on to 85.
We say Bears still suck. But, like you inherit, and you're like, like, this is just not a modern franchise.
That's right.
Like we gotta, like the stadium's crappy, the food's crappy, it's kind of like not clean, but we know what to do.
Right.
So now who do we have to engage, to get it done? And I think at this point, fortunately, to your question, which means dead on, is it's a matter of not like, what do we do, but how do we do more of what's working? Because it's not like we don't have wins.
Right.
And if people like Cognite, right? And if people like Cognite can do the work they do, and they're like, we said, we're not going to California. We're not going to Texas.
Right.
And I got kids in those states. I got nothing. These like, we're all the United States. So we're all simpatico. Okay. But we're the baby and it's our time.
So, yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think I see more today in terms of cooperation and, not believing you have to be this, monolithic, I'm going to be the savior of Arizona and so on. Like, I think that's an impossibility.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, like, as you mentioned, a lot of like great dominoes that are starting to fall Arizona's way and so on. How do you see that being offset by some of these like other macro trends that we're seeing in terms of like new grads actually getting hired out of school and so on? Like there's a crazy stat, like, and I don't know how reliable this Signal Fire report is that we dug up, but like there's in 24, this data is from, like, there's been a 50% drop in hire of new tech grads today than versus pre-pandemic, right? And I think there's obviously some technology innovation driving a lot of that, where you used to put 20 junior coders on something.
Right.
Like that's one experienced coder armed with AI these days. So like, how do you, I'm curious to get your opinion on like, how do we also combat some of those headwinds the technology is actually enabling?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll try and be gentle with my initial response, which is, let's just say it this way. I would not be confident that data is actually, comes from people who actually do the work. What I mean, like the engineers. So if data like that, and so I'm not saying it's wrong, but what I would just say is this, is that when you're on the field every day and then you see reports like this, and then you say, what I'm seeing on the field is not consistent with the reports, I'm going to believe what I see in the field.
And that's kind of my question.
Sometimes to a fault.
Like, it is like, to the point earlier on, like people, let's just say businesses that are either located here or want to,
yes,
build an epicenter here. Yes. Are you seeing that traction from a hiring standpoint within the group?
Well, so I'll give you a great example. And this is, again, just a jewel. So 2 just quick ones. So as I got to, as we build the Nerd Network, of course, one of the benefits to me, right, is that, I'm new here. And so you start connecting all the nerds, you start to know every company. Every company in the state, like literally every company.
Yeah, who's hiring?
So I'm talking to I'll leave the names out, but some significant, people in our local economy, people very instrumental in bringing TSMC here, etc. And I'm like, hey, did you know about this $20 billion company in Chandler, Arizona called Venture HR? And they're like, never heard of it. I'm like, okay, it's just 20 billion, but it's built here, private company built here, probably going to go public in a few years, or maybe, they'll do whatever.
Have you heard of it?
And thousands of,
no,
yeah. Okay. So Venture HR, VENSURE HR. So it turns out that one of their employees is in the Nerd Network. So that's how we learned about it. Right. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. But I would just say back to your point is that one of the benefits of being through the stuff I've been through in life with work is, if you look at John Deere in agriculture, it's like along came the tractors. Oh my God, no jobs. All the jobs will go away. Then along came, PCs. Oh, the other jobs are going to go away. Then we put a ton of PCs. I had literally one of the first PCs at John Deere back in the day. And everybody bought tons of PCs and no productivity improved. It actually went down. It's kind of like EHRs in healthcare.
Yeah.
And then networking came along and productivity actually improved. Why? Because it turns out you needed to connect to things to actually have things like email that might be helpful. So here's what I would say, I think is a trend that we not only is the one we should focus on, to your question. And it's one that's going to happen whether we like it or not. My experience is that as long as it's somebody who is thoughtful about what they're majoring in, okay, read, not journalism, not communications, no offense to, not political science. God bless all our elected officials in Washington, D.C., most of whom have such backgrounds and are lawyers, which maybe explains why, we have some reindustrialization opportunities. But what I would say is this, the pattern that has not changed is the following. Show me somebody who's just taking or who has a relevant major. You define whatever relevant. We define it as there's demand out there for the talent, just generally, right? Show me somebody who has a relevant major and has one internship. I promise you I'll show somebody who has a job.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I would say in Arizona. I think that within 10 years, maybe we'll start to see it clearly and it'll be reported probably within 5. That exact same paradigm will be happening at the high school level. Okay. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, that we're through a combination of the technology keeps advancing, the effectiveness with which we educate keeps advancing, the self-teaching nature. Like today, if you look at one of our startups locally, Axio.ai, personalized learning system, Dr. Mark Knopfel, he's an ASU PhD, and he was a student regent when he was at ASU, kind of a protege of Michael Crow's. His solution for personalized learning system in a university context is already deployed at a few universities. What you take away from seeing it is the amount of time that it takes to get an engineering degree or an analytics degree, business, whatever, is going to go down dramatically, like total time, right? You already see this. I think it's, I forget which medical school here. I think it's U of A, that you get the medical degree, become a doctor in 3 years, not 4. Right.
Well, I thought you were going to bring up, have you guys heard of this, a Bill Ackerman school that just expanded to Arizona? It's, I think it's called Alpha or
Alpha School. So between us chickens, here's the cool thing. Yeah. Even the Alpha School people, it sounds great. It is great. It's an experiment. How do you know? It's 40 to 100K a year per student. Wow. Okay. That's how you know it's an experiment, right? Because we
know 2 kids that are going there. It's the big thing at Rancher right now.
Yeah. But what I would tell you is that's why I'd encourage you or anybody who's doing that, go look at Axio. Axio is doing what technology should do, which is if it's really well implemented technology, it's not 40 to 100K. It's like 1/10 of that.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what technology does. It brings productivity. So if somebody says, look at this new technology and the price is through the moon, you're like, no offense, that's like alpha.
My first computer or first handheld video camera.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
10 bags.
So if
and
you
10
kind of
grand.
think of it, if we're conscious of, oh yeah, okay. So everybody who has a relevant degree and an internship gets a job. Always has, always will. Okay. And then we say, but you know what's going to happen because of the advances, because we're actually getting to, and Axio.ai is a great example of this, something that all us parents crave, which is true mastery learning, which very simply just means you go on to, I don't know, algebra from basic arithmetic when you've interacted with the experience and we know that you know arithmetic.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not hoping. We're not just pushing you through, right? You've mastered it. So you're stacking the wins, right? So if you kind of appreciate, oh my gosh, we're going to have education productivity like we haven't seen in our lifetimes, then what's going to happen, not surprisingly, is people who come out of high school with relevant education and some experience are going to go, a lot of them, straight into the workforce. There's actually a high school today, I think it's in North Carolina, that if you say, I want to be a plumber, it's a high school totally set up for being a plumber. Yeah. And when you get out, you can actually go make like
what do you call that? An externship. What do you call that in the trades?
Oh,
apprenticeship.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly
and
right.
I think that's the key is like, it's so easy to apply for jobs these days. When people say like, oh, I put out 500 or 1,000 applications, it's like, you mean you clicked a button?
Yeah.
You know,
right.
And distributed this to everyone. Like if you can go out and get real experience in the area that company needs experience, right?
Yes.
And you can prove that, that's totally different to me than, hey,
well, it's just like you said in
resume out
your article about, growing your VC business. You're like, look, you can, you labor all day on your, whatever your thing is that you're doing. But if when you're asked, hey, what customer have you talked to? And you say, well, I haven't talked to one yet.
Yeah, right.
It's like, well, why have you even started working on anything?
And there's a lot of that. That's why I asked the question around, just the context and real world experience and like, what does it look like to succeed in going from a 0 to 1?
Yes.
Because so many folks I talk to, and it's getting better, but like have the idea, they even taken in some money and they put together a product and it's like, well, where's the real world feedback on this? And that's just,
well,
that's
8 out of 10 of them, particularly when I get asked to talk to like, masters of entrepreneurship and innovation, I know Hitendra Chaturvedi over at, who's a supply chain professor, but very entrepreneurship and innovation masters focused with that program. And he says, hey, will you come talk to the class again? And I'm like, said, are you going to be offended if I tell him to go get a job? And he says, no. I said, okay. So, to me, when I interact with some of the young founders or some of the students in the master's program, 8 out of 10 of them, I'm like literally pleading with them, go get a job. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because why? Because it's kind of like saying, let's take hockey. Somebody comes along and says, I want to win a Stanley Cup. It's like, cool.
Awesome.
Have you played hockey?
Have you ever played against those guys?
I'm going to buy my skates this weekend.
Fantastic.
You're like, well, there's a few steps.
Yeah.
Well, you consider the amount of investment in, traditional universities these days.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes.
How do you know you want to do that for the rest of your life? There's no way.
This is the word you nailed is relevance. And that's where the education system, we don't need to open this Pandora's box, but just that's the failure, right? Like even at the high school level, what does relevance even mean? I don't think the kids know. And this is I have a kid in high school, right? And not that American history is a bad thing to learn. You should generally know it or whatever, and hear the stories and read the books and whatnot. But forcing them to memorize something that they can ask Siri to tell them the answer to, or ChatGPT or whoever, they can verbally say, hey, what happened here? Forcing that memorization isn't relevant to me. Like, what skill are they getting out of that is going to have some sort of relevance?
Yeah, don't get me started on cursive writing.
But here's the great part. It's like, if you really want to have fun with ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, ask this question: do you have a soul? It's very interesting.
And what do they tell you?
Basically, they say no, but it's very apologetic, and it's not a short answer. And then if you say,
but I really would like one.
That's right. It's like who was the one in The Wizard of Oz, the one who had no heart?
Yeah,
the Tin Man, right?
Mhm.
You know, and if I only had a brain, if I, you know, stuff, it's like, no, we got the heart, we got the brain, we got the courage, but we got to your point, we have to apply it.
That's right.
And you learn not through, you know, you learn some memorization, whatever, like, but you really learn through doing.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of the point. And what I would say, I'm a little bit of just chirping away steadily, but to your point with like Michael Crow, and I forget the NAU president's name, Suresh Garamella, who's our new president at University of Arizona. And I just say, guys, you know, how is it possible, like at ASU, and I love ASU, okay? And hope they get back to the college football playoff.
Me too.
But, or University of Arizona. Either.
There you go.
But anyway, I'm like, how is it possible that the university that's graduating more engineers than any other university in the country, okay, and has, if that wasn't enough, the only relationship, like a formal relationship to apply AI in education with OpenAI, okay? How is it possible that even the phrase of education productivity is like more of an oxymoron than like a rally cry? How is this possible, right? This doesn't make any sense. So the good news is we kind of have the puzzle pieces, right? But to be blunt, what I would just tell you, it's people like us. You know, we're going to it's like the saying, what is it? You can lead a horse to water, but you really got to get him in a headlock to drown him. You know, it's like, that's kind of the mentality. We got to go a little extra. We got to lean in a little more, and we got to help. I think the best thing, back to your point, you hit on it, not surprising given that you have a high school age, you know, child, right? Is it the relevance? It's like, okay, well, that's the parents. The parents can now, we can help the ones who need help, maybe don't have parents or don't have parents who is dialed in. But the first wave is all through parents who's like, our job is to help them with the relevance thing.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, because you know what? If they go for something, and this is a little counterintuitive because your parents, you're like, oh, you know, I got to help Johnny, you know, do whatever he's meant to do. Okay. But as we always say in our family, it's like, I'll tell you what, maybe it's God's plan for you to be a poet. Okay. But if you start as an engineer, you're going to be a well-paid
a lot more time to invest in that poetry.
You know, because you're not going to start doing you'll do your poet stuff on the side, right? Because you're kind of like that pay.
Yeah.
That pays pretty good.
Pays better. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a good area to wrap up. So, I mean, like augmenting and coming together as a community to fill in, again, these gaps, I think is absolutely critical. So, if folks want to find your group, where can they go? How do they sign up? Like,
all they do, it's actually pretty easy, because now, particularly because there's like 530, you know, growing a couple every day kind of thing, is they just ping me on LinkedIn. That's it. Like Don Fotsch.
Don Fotsch, like Scotch.
Yeah. Fotsch. We got an extra consonant. We tried vowel. Didn't work. But yeah, I'm out there. Anybody who's just like you guys, I'm pretty active on, you know, LinkedIn, and in particular Arizona stuff. So at this point, it would be kind of hard not to find me if you were trying. But it's all through word of mouth growth, you know, and, you know, to me, the last thing I would just reinforce is, you know, I'm grateful to be with you here this morning. I think that part of Arizona's soul, right, is we're a culture of conversation, you know, and this is really important, because just like through doing, part of doing is like being able to talk to other people. You know, one of my favorite related things is like, I would say to you, like, hey, if it's ever helpful to is it your son who's
my daughter's in high school.
Your daughter in high school.
My oldest is in high school.
Yeah. So, but whenever I hear like, okay, high school age, you know, I'm like, anything I can do, anything our kids can do to help.
Yeah.
Like, they have extra uncles, they have extra cousins. This is what it is to live, you know, Arizona.
That's right.
And I think, the last quick piece I would just offer is if I could hit a button and fix, or improve, I should say, one thing tomorrow, here in Arizona, it would be the effort required, meaning it should require less effort, for some of our founders all the founders I've met, and I've met plenty, who I think are good, and I think you guys either know or would think were good if you met them, they get funded. They don't get funded by local money. And that's not good, because then when they exit, you know, we don't have as much seed corn. So I will just tell you, you know, if the plan from above drops another nice chunk of change in our bank accounts, I'm going to, you know, be pinging you guys and others like, hey, if this, what do they say, our theme or whatever for our VC. If we don't have one that's basically Arizona Founders Fund thesis, then let's go create it. And then we say, we just have a one-page website, and we say we exclusively invest in Arizona companies, and we will price match because we're lazy. That would be the one page, right? We're like, you do all your homework, it's all good. But this is a home team, you're a home player,
right.
So we'll match. But boom, done. So at least it's a step there. We lean into the fact that they get money elsewhere. You just know if you care, and a lot of them love Arizona at times more than some of the investing entities do.
Sure.
For understandable reasons, given the LPs, right? But that seed stage, early stage money, it would be good for all of us if that, frankly, just happened a little quicker.
Yeah, I think, just to define that for listeners. So, I mean, seed and these definitions have changed quite a bit, but I think it's pre-revenue seed where there's a big gap.
Basically,
in Arizona,
like
which is always the hardest
money.
bucket.
Exactly. First outside money is not
always the hardest bucket to fill at scale because revenue is a strong indicator of success.
But by the way, and that's why things like the Nerd Network are so important, because people who would be more inclined to provide some of that funding should be able to come to people who know a lot of builders, right? And they're like one conversation away from, okay, I get it. Like, I'm comfortable.
It de-risks your investment as well if you know, that exposure.
Exactly.
I think the overall takeaway here is simply like you have to augment this. And I mean, like everyday people, like people in the community that want to see it succeed. Like this is not a system that's going to be solved by traditional university. It's not something that we're at a flywheel stage. Like you've got to get involved, and that goes for wherever you reside on the food chain there. If you're, just starting out and want to get a job at a great startup, or if you've gone that cycle and had a windfall and have liquidity, like there's a place for you. And that's the only way that this ecosystem is.
And I think that in Arizona, to me, the way it kind of shows up, people with experience you're a player coach. And if you get in the game, it's because you love Arizona. And it's okay if you don't, then you love to be in Arizona. But to your point, we have literally growing armies of people who love Arizona and are learning kind of as we all are together how they can be a player coach because they have experience. And I just wrap with it's the power of the invitation, just like you guys exhibit in asking me to come this morning.
And I appreciate you joining us. So again, if you want to get a hold of Don, any of the stuff sounds good, hit him up on LinkedIn, super active there. And really low barriers to entry on groups like this. I think the only requirement is like show up and participate. So
there you go.
And of course, if you're listening to us for the first time, or for God's sake, you haven't subscribed yet to this podcast,
smash that like.
Click get him, Josh. And I appreciate everyone tuning in to join us. Don, thank you again so much for joining us here today in person. Feels good to see the whites of people's eyes. Indeed.
Exactly.
And we will see you again next time on another episode of Cheat Code and Friends. Thanks all.